This podcast is rated S for spoilers. Listener discretion is advised. Podcast. This is episode 78, the movie review of Avengers Infinity War. There's no trailer for this week because Ian's already seen Deadpool 2. I'm Graham Ricks, and here with me is my friend and co-pilot Ian Jones.
Hey, how you doing? So I have to wonder, since we're sort of the dynamic duo, or whatever the Marvel equivalent would be, I guess Cap and Falcon.
Cap and Falcon. All right.
Now that half the universe is gone,
yes,
I took the quiz and I survived Thanos' snap.
Yes,
so I'm still here.
What is the website? It's like didthanosKillme.com. It's very direct. DidthanosKillme.com. And I took the test also, and I also survived. So it's up to us to try to take out Thanos.
It's actually didthaноskill.me.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. Didthaноskill.me.
And it's incredible. So, basically, we both survived, which is incredibly rare, because just about everyone lost their best friend.
Right?
Seemingly. And so I have to wonder who else, because, I mean, that probably means all of our other friends got eliminated.
Right?
But that it's up to Ian and Graham and I, to take on Thanos.
Oh, geez.
And we don't have any powers at all, so...
Nothing. We don't even have really powerful suits or anything.
I know.
That'd be terrible to rely on us to try to save the universe.
Forget it. Y'all just gonna have to stay dead.
Oh man! So how you been, man? We've been
Good.
Like busy. There's been a couple of weeks here that we haven't recorded. So how you doing?
Really good. So I was in Washington for this movie. I was there for about 7 days.
Yep.
And it was just incredible. It's so beautiful. I got to meet Annie's family. We got to go and see this with her kids, Tristan and Jessa.
Yeah.
And it's just so beautiful. So I will be moving to Puyallup, Washington.
Wait, what?
I know. It is a city called Puyallup, Washington. It's a Native American word.
What sounds very Native American.
Right.
Jeez. All right.
So, yeah. And there's a lot of those kind of cities and towns, and it's like 40 minutes outside of Seattle. But as Annie told me, and as I soon discovered, every city sort of bleeds into another one. So it's kind of funny how they're all bunched up together.
That's weird. Huh. I haven't been up there in the Pacific Northwest, so I definitely want to take a vacation up there and, see all the beautiful sights. I always hear how beautiful it is up there.
It is. It's just so different, after 30 plus years in the desert.
Yeah, I keep forgetting that you've just been in the desert your entire life.
I know. I was just in shock by all the green. Just looking around in wonder.
Jeez,
I didn't know there was this much green in the whole galaxy or universe or whatever the line is.
Jeez, God dang it. That's good to hear. I'll miss you being close by, buddy.
Yeah, well, you'll see my mug, and I might...
Oh, yeah.
Chances are I might have to fly into Phoenix sometime, so maybe you can pick me up from the airport.
Oh, that's always fun.
We know how fun it is dealing with that airport in Phoenix.
Yeah.
If you haven't dealt with that airport in Phoenix, boy, is it fun. And I know it's an experience is what it is, because it's so easy to drive by the terminal that
Oh,
you
yeah.
need to pick someone up at.
Yes,
That
it
you're
is.
then screwed because all the signs, they want to eject you out of the airport and into
Yes.
some dangerous neighborhood.
Yes.
And you really have to be on the ball to circle back. And what sucks is, even though I'm very familiar with the airport, one time I drove by the terminal that I was supposed to be at, which was Terminal 3.
Yes.
Usually most of them come into Terminal 2.
Yeah.
But I was supposed to go to Terminal 3, and I missed it twice in a row. And I was so mad at myself that I had to circle back twice.
Going to that freaking airport, man, it is tough because it's just, you're not wrong. Like, all the signs are how to get out of the airport and not necessarily how to cycle back around.
Yeah.
So you just kind of like, you just miss a turn and then you have to find your way back to the airport. It's terrible. The thing is, now that's bad, but it's funny. I just got through having breakfast with my girl Jackie, and she was like, and we were talking about, because we're planning on going on a vacation soon, and so we were talking about flying in different locations, and so she's been on a flight a few times, but she said that she had to fly into Dallas once. Dallas is one of the worst airports to fly into if you have a connecting flight in the country. It is so bad because the way they have it designed is that once you get in there, when you arrive, the departures are on the other side. So no matter where you arrive, you have to walk all the way to the other side of the airport. So if you have a really tight connecting flight, you might miss it. You might just miss it because it takes a long time to get from one side to the other, and they don't have like the walkways or anything. You just have to book it. You have to book it there to get there. And I remember the reason why the way they fixed it was they put this really ridiculous tram that's like a figure 8 that just like goes around and goes from one side of the airport to the other side of the airport, and it just keeps going around. And they knew it was a huge issue, and that's how they fixed it. But that airport is terrible. I hate flying into Dallas. It's like the worst. It is
the largest airport, I think, on the planet.
It's just like terrible. I can't stand flying into Dallas. I don't even think Dallas is that big. It definitely feels like when you're there and you're trying to book from one side to the other, and you're just like, crap, I'm gonna miss my flight. Oh, it's terrible.
Well, I think that airport is like the largest one.
Period. Is it?
Yeah, I think so.
I find that hard to believe.
Let me see here.
I really don't think that's true, but I do know that you might be getting it mixed up, but the thing that I know is trying to get from one side to the other is always the biggest pain. It is the most annoying thing to get there. And if you have, the thing is like the amount of times I've flown into Dallas a lot because I'm from Oklahoma, so I've been in and out of Dallas before, going back and forth. And the amount of times that I've gone into Dallas and they have that connecting flight, I either miss the flight or I'm completely late for the plane. Like, it's like, I don't know why all the schedules are super tight, but every single time I go into Dallas, there's this like little tiny window that you have to get from one section to the next, and it always messes you over. And the amount of times I've had to have a plane wait for me and make that plane late is a lot, which always ticks everybody off. That's always fun when you're walking into the airport. It's like the plane, and everybody's just like, and they're all just looking at you like, oh, this guy's the reason why we're late. I have a connecting flight somewhere else, And I totally get everybody's like so ticked off by it, but I don't know why everything in Dallas is just completely screwed up.
Okay, alright. Well, actually, this says Denver is the first, and I believe it. Denver's another one that's Denver's a nightmare.
Big. Yeah. That one's
I've had to do that one a few times.
Yeah.
And looking at the security line in Denver is enough to make you, like, get really nervous.
Man. God, that's
but terrible. On my returning flight, I guess it was so early that they didn't even have me remove my shoes, and it was such a surreal experience because the airport. So SeaTac, the airport was packed. It was packed with people. Yeah. And I was like, well, it's a good thing I'm here like 2.5 hours early.
Yeah.
Or whatever. And I mean, it was really tough. It was so early in the morning, though, that I wanted Annie to drop me off. And I know she didn't want to, but I knew how long the walk was, you know, because she parked the first time. And it was still dark out. It was that early in the morning. It's because the only nonstop flight from Seattle to Tucson is the first one of the day.
Yes.
It goes to Tucson, and then it's a nonstop flight back. So there's only those 2 times. You leave the same time. When she comes here, it's always very early in the morning. And when she leaves, it's late morning because it's always that one flight on Alaska Airlines. But I was there so early, and the airport was crowded. It was packed. Jeez. But all of a sudden, like, they weren't letting anyone else behind me, and it was surreal. Like,
wow.
I started getting nervous. I was getting closer to the, you know, where you put your bag up on the little...
Yeah.
What do you call it? The rolling thing? To be x-rayed?
The x-ray thing.
But, like, they weren't letting anyone else behind me, and it just got really quiet in the airport. and this black lady looks at me, and she's like, just leave your shoes on. And I was like, really?
Really? Okay.
I was like, okay. And I didn't, it's not like I had a belt or anything, and so they just waved me through. So I think everyone else, the reason why they were stopping, everyone else, I was the last one to get away with that.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, this is great. Suddenly I fit, you know, because I was heartbroken about leaving.
Yeah.
But, you know, and the airport doesn't make it any better because it's like getting punched in the face, you know, when you leave the person you love.
Yes.
And have to go back. It's just like, you know, now we're gonna search your entire life here.
Oh man, that's crazy.
Hey. All right.
All right, we gotta get into.
We're gonna get going here. Let's do this.
This happened with Rampage also. I'm telling you, this happens when we don't have a trailer every single time. It's fine.
It's just weird for me to discuss a trailer for a movie that I just saw yesterday.
Yeah, right.
Without talking about the movie.
Yes, I haven't seen it yet. So
all right. Okay.
We'll have to do that. We'll record that one next week. But oh my gosh!
All right.
All right. Let's just take a break.
Play some music,
and we'll get into Avengers: Infinity War.
All right.
The Avengers and their allies must be willing to sacrifice all in an attempt to defeat the powerful Thanos before his blitz of devastation puts an end to the universe. This movie is directed by the Russo brothers, who have done both of the really awesome Captain America movies, both Winter Soldier and Civil War. They also have done some directing in TV, which they've done Arrested Development and also Community. And so these guys are great, and because you look at something like Civil War and then this movie, it seems like they're really good about dealing with massive amount of characters and still giving it to work. Because that's what's tough about this type of movie that we're watching here.
Yeah, the ensemble cast.
Yeah, it's a huge ensemble cast, which starts with Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark and Iron Man. He was in Weird Science, Chaplin, and Ally McBeal. Those are the ones that I'm going to say that he's done. Chris Hemsworth is Thor, of course. So he was in Star Trek, The Cabin in the Woods, Snow White, and the Huntsman. Mark Ruffalo as Bruce, or Hulk, and he was in The Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, Zodiac, and Shutter Island. Chris Evans as Steve Rogers, or Captain America. Fantastic Four, Snowpiercer, and I want to say TMNT, because people don't remember that he actually plays Casey Jones in TMNT.
Plays the voice of Casey Jones.
Yes, he's the voice of Casey Jones in TMNT. And TMNT, I freaking love that movie. It feels like an extended episode of the old one that we remember as kids, you know? It's like everything's just right in that movie. And some of the newer ones I don't think are quite as good as that one, but I really enjoyed TMNT. Also, if anybody want to watch Snowpiercer is like a fun little movie. It's kind of an interesting movie. You've seen Snowpiercer, haven't you?
Yeah. As far as like movies that didn't make it past the press junket, and went straight to like DVD or Netflix. Snowpiercer is actually a really good one.
Oh yeah, it's a really good one. I definitely recommend people go see Snowpiercer. I believe it's still on Netflix. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, it might be, but
either
way, I mean, it's worth, I think, rental.
Definitely rent it and figure it out, or figure out where it's at, rent it, and then give it a watch. It's a fun little movie. It's just different. It's a very different movie. Next up, we have Scarlett Johansson as Natasha Romanoff, or Black Widow. She was in The Horse Whisperer and Lost in Translation, and of course, The Island, which I always like to bring up because I feel like that's a Michael Bay movie that people just forget about. That it just didn't happen, but
yeah. Well, I think Transformers is sort of overshadowed all the other work that he's probably done.
Right? And he's done a lot of movies. Like he's been doing movies for a very long time, so it's so weird for people to just forget about some of the other ones. But I mean, the best one I'd say he's ever done has to be The Rock. The Rock is so good. I feel like that's one of my favorite action movies. I love The Rock. Don Cheadle as James Rhodes, or War Machine. He was in Boogie Nights, Out of Sight, and of course all the Ocean's movies. But not Ocean's 8. He's not going to be in Ocean's 8. That's a totally different story.
Yeah.
We'll probably rate that one too.
I'm so looking forward to that movie.
Oh, wow. I don't know what your problem is. I think that'll be a fun movie.
Alright.
Worst case scenario, I have this weird thing for Anne Hathaway. Like, it's not just like... I have a weird thing for Anne Hathaway. I don't know why.
Oh, you never mentioned this.
Have I never told you this before? Okay, so, I don't know why, because there's a very specific type of woman that I like. And... so I have a type for sure. Anne Hathaway does not fit that type.
No, she
at all. Not. No, at all. Yet I have this weird, like, I just think she's, like, super attractive. I don't even know why that is. I just, like, really like Anne Hathaway. So, worst case scenario, I get to see her.
I'm stunned, so I'm actually going to let it go. I can't tell, for everyone listening, I can't tell you how long I've known this guy. For him to never mention that he's, like, secretly hoarding copies of the Princess Diaries and shit like that.
I've definitely watched the Princess Diaries, and I've also watched Devil Wears Prada.
Oh my god. Oh.
Oh. I love admitting things on the podcast, especially when it's the first time you've heard it also.
And I know it's the truth because there's no way you would make up something like this.
No!
Oh, damn. Wow.
Next up, we have Benedict Cumberbatch as Doctor Strange. He was in the Hobbit movie, Star Trek Into Darkness, and he's also in Black Mass, which we also rated. We did a review of Black Mass, and that's one of those movies where I feel like that's the first movie where Benedict Cumberbatch doesn't look weird to me. And I think we even discussed that in the podcast, because he's
I think the more you see him, right?
Maybe.
But I also feel like they've gotten him, they've figured out what hairstyles to give him. And
yeah, he looked like just like normal. Like he didn't look really unusual in that movie. And then I think he looks the best as Doctor Strange, but that's what happens when you get the Marvel treatment. So it's just kind of what it is. Tom Holland as Peter Parker or Spider-Man. He was in The Impossible, In the Heart of the Sea, and The Lost City of Z. Chadwick Boseman is T'Challa in Black Panther. Chadwick Boseman's he's done a lot of roles with like famous black characters. So like he did 42, he did Get On Up, and he did Marshall. And I'm always wondering, it's one of those things where you see, so like when you think of Chadwick Boseman, I'm trying to figure out what type of parents would name their kid Chadwick. It just doesn't seem like who would name their kid Chadwick. It's just like such a weird name. It sounds like it should be like a British thing. but he's definitely not British. So,
Right.
so I don't know, it's like really weird. I just always thought that was strange. Like, Chadwick? Who names their kid Chadwick?
Maybe they were banking on the fact that he would be famous one day in some capacity. So they were like, we've got to give him a name that'll stand out.
Oh, yeah, and it definitely stands out. I never forget Chadwick Boseman. He's the only Chadwick that exists, apparently.
When you type in Chadwick, that's, and it could just be, he could just do this whole share thing. Or we could call him the Wick.
Nice.
Like his friends call him the Wick.
Oh,
hey, when's
terrible.
the Wick getting here?
I wonder how it feels to be friends with Chadwick Boseman.
I don't know. Does he have room in his entourage for
right?
a crappy white guy?
Oh, that's hilarious.
Because if so, I know a guy.
Nice. Chadwick Boseman's awesome. Except for that Gods of Egypt movie, that's rough. But that movie has a bunch of other problems.
Yeah, and has nothing to do with the actors in it. How dare you take a job on this crappy movie, Chadwick?
Oh, man. The last one I have here, since there's so many characters, I'm stopping at 10. So I'm going to say Zoe Saldana as Gamora. She was in Star Trek, Avatar, and Columbiana. There's so many characters in this movie, and we'll definitely talk about that later. But the thing that I think that I'm really curious about is when the Russo brothers are on set, they have Chris Hemsworth, Chris Evans, and Chris Pratt. How do they distinguish? Do they just use their character names?
No.
Like because you can't just
I'll
say,
tell
hey,
you exactly
Chris.
how they handled it, my friend.
Okay.
They broke all three Chris's up into 3 different groups and did the entire movie that way. That's how they handled it. you had Thor in one part of the movie, you had Rogers in another, and you had the third Chris with Robert Downey, and none of them interact.
And none of them interact with each other.
So it's easy. They're only ever dealing with one Chris at the same time.
Oh, that's fantastic. I never thought of that, but I don't think they ever really interact with each other.
No.
Well, that's not true. Definitely Chris
Thor
Hemsworth
comes
and Chris
in at the
Pratt.
end, but that's it.
Definitely Chris Hemsworth and Chris Pratt are in the scene together because there's a little
correct.
fight kind of like there's this little bickering going on.
But you notice
between
that Thor is, first of all, unconscious.
Yes.
So they're probably calling, like, hey, Hemsworth, come over here and blah, 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 You need to lie more still when you're out. But I mean, for the bulk of the movie, those 3 characters are separated.
They're
those
definitely separated. You're not wrong. That reminds me of freaking Chris Hemsworth being knocked out. I just now thought, I don't have this in my notes, but I definitely wanted to make a comment about how in the previous Thor movie, he loses his eye.
Yes,
and we're both talking about...
I've got that in big, bold letters.
We're talking about how they disfigured one of the best-looking characters amongst a bunch of really good-looking characters.
Yeah.
So it's just like, it's like, I can't believe they did that. And it didn't take long for them to replace that eye.
Yes. And in such a sweet way. That was actually one of my likes.
Okay, we'll talk about it.
Okay, all right.
We'll talk about it later. Let's go ahead and get into the Corks of Light. So let's take a break real quick, and then we'll get in there.
And we're back.
Nice. I like how you caught me off guard there. So I guess we're back. So here we go. So we're getting into the Corks of Light section.
Wait a minute, are we going with that? Okay.
We're going with it.
All right, because it sounded so good, right?
We'll start with my quirks. So here's the deal. It's funny that you just you said that out of nowhere, and so I'm trying to hustle through. And it's funny because I had to catch my space on the screen because I used to print these damn things out. I used to actually print them out and have them in front of me with papers, and I just quit doing that because it's ridiculous. But it's funny that I had to quickly figure out my spot. If I had the paper, it wouldn't have took very long.
Oh, jeez.
So the first thing that I have to do, and this is something that happens in a lot of movies, where there's always this linchpin that screws everyone over. And so in this movie, Chris Pratt is the scapegoat in this movie because they almost have Thanos. They've got the glove wrapped around, they're pulling the Infinity Gauntlet off, and Chris Pratt decides, he finds out that he killed Gamora, and so he proceeds to say all these things, and then which gives him, Thanos, enough time to recover, because the God, I can't even remember, Palm Clementia, or whatever the heck her name is. Is that the right character? Either way, the one that has the Mantis, that's what I'm thinking. Mantis, she's putting him asleep because that's her ability. And so he's fighting it, but Chris Pratt just having this little, extra little thing because he has to react to what happens to Gamora, it doesn't work. The plan falls apart immediately, and then all the other dominoes fall. And it's just I always thought that's one of those little things that I always find so funny in these types of movies. There's always somebody that causes the dominoes to fall and just completely screw everything over, and Chris Pratt was that in this instance. The only other thing I said, I have a few things. I had a problem with, one of the things I had a problem with in this movie was the performance issues with Hulk.
Okay.
I'm not exactly sure how that happened. It's not really explained. You see Hulk at the very beginning of the movie. He gets beat up by Thanos immediately, which is an awesome scene because it introduces how powerful Thanos is.
Yes. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that whole sequence is just a great sequence because we've been building up to Thanos this whole time, and his introduction is just fantastic. And so Hulk, being one of the strongest Avengers, is so crazy to see him just get pretty much eliminated immediately. He just immediately gets rid of him. And so I'm not sure why the rest of the movie, other than the only thing that makes sense is Hulk being afraid of Thanos. But that doesn't make sense either because it's Hulk.
Yes, and I'm not sure, and I think that's maybe what people perceive, but I don't think that's what's going on.
I would like for you to explain what's going on, because I really don't think the movie does it. I don't think it explains what's going on. It's very weird that they're having this kind of weird back and forth issue, and he can't quite transform.
So, and they've laid the groundwork for this over the course of the past few movies, but I think it really took shape in Ragnarok because Hulk was not letting Banner back.
No, he was not.
So those two are at odds with each other.
Yes.
What I feel like is going on, because we haven't gotten the version of Hulk where Hulk and Banner are in sync. It's never been that case. Hulk has only ever shown up to protect Banner because the two are connected. But in Ragnarok, that connection is totally separated.
Yes.
They're not on the same page. And so that's a really dangerous thing for the Avengers, especially with Thanos being in play, is that, now Hulk doesn't want to cooperate because I think he feels like he's being used. Just as in Ragnarok, Banner thought that Thor was trying to use him simply to get to Hulk. I think the same thing is happening, and Hulk just doesn't want to cooperate anymore.
That is, I can get that explanation, but it is not explained at all in the movie. It just isn't. They're having this issue. It's one of those things where I almost feel like it's a story plot that will resolve itself in the next movie.
Yes,
it's just
definitely.
In this movie, it doesn't make any sense why it's there. It's just there, and you don't know what's going on.
Well, and so this kind of ties into one of the things that I was going to talk about, which
let's do it.
Which was sort of a like and a quirk. Okay. When Heimdall dies in the opening sequence, he does something very important, and Heimdall is a character who has great vision and potentially can see into the future, can unravel certain things.
Yes.
With his dying breath, he sends Hulk to Earth.
Yes, he does.
And I think that move, that gesture, which ultimately costs him his life, is going to be the thing that saves the Avengers in the next movie.
I can see that.
Is the fact that the Hulk was sent to Earth to have a chance at living, because otherwise the Hulk would have been killed right there.
Yes.
And the Avengers would not have had any shot at stopping Thanos.
Yep.
So this means that finally, at some point here, before when Avengers 4 happens, Banner and Hulk are going to have to get on the same page. They haven't been this entire time, and Banner needs to be able to control, the monster within. Yes. And in 2 movies now, both characters have thought that they're being used, and I think it just needs to be a choice. Banner needs to make that choice to fight, and he has. There is sort of that scene in this movie where he wants to do it himself.
Yes.
But he's got to fight the other guy. He's got to fight the green guy who's, trying to stop him from changing. And so I think both of those things, the fact that Heimdall sends him to Earth and spares him, and the fact that, Hulk and Banner have to get on the same page, are 2 really big things that need to happen to swing things in favor of the Avengers.
Yes. I can totally see that. I definitely could see that. So I hope it gets resolved in the second movie, and that's what my hope is, because it's a very weird issue to have in this movie with all this other stuff going on, and my assumption is it gets resolved, so I just hope it does. And I hope it's what you're saying, and it gets resolved in a really big way, because it's definitely one of the glaring kind of weird things in this movie, and I just always thought it was strange. And that's all the quirks that I have, so I'm going to go ahead and have you pick them up. Okay, I can't even remember. I saw this movie a while ago, but...
Yeah. So I've got a few, and we'll just kind of work through them here. Yep. The biggest thing that stood out to me was that Vision was nerfed in this movie. Okay. He's a really powerful character, and right away he gets, stabbed in the back. He never seems to recover. The guy has an Infinity Stone in his forehead, though, and he's literally useless in all of these fights where everyone's getting their asses handed to him. And so I just thought that was really, really bizarre, because anyone else who has had an Infinity Stone, and in the Thor sequel, Dark World, which wasn't a great one, I always wondered why Thor and his hammer, Mjolnir, was having such a hard time fighting that dark elf at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that elf had the Reality Stone. And so that's why they were struggling in the way that they did. Mm-hmm. So it just seemed so odd to me that Vision was basically taken out of the fight and really doesn't contribute much. I mean, that gives everyone else a chance to shine, but Scarlet Witch and
she gets a lot of play.
Yeah, she gets a lot of screen time, and one of the things is a lot of the people who die get quite a bit of screen time.
Yes.
And I think that's definitely a choice that the filmmakers make.
I agree.
And so, I mean, I don't really have a comment on that, other than I just thought it was really bizarre that Vision wasn't able to stick up for himself a little bit more. When he's got an Infinity Stone there, he should be kicking ass for the Avengers, even though we knew at some point he's got to lose it, and that's probably going to be his end.
Yep.
Here's a little thing which totally gets, the movie's so big this gets completely forgotten about, but Thor is now the last of his kind. He's like the last Kryptonian. And no one ever mentions the fact that all the Asgardians are now gone. It's just him. That's it. Yep. And I think that that's a really sad thing. And they never mention it once in the movie.
Yeah, you're correct. And I definitely didn't really think about that at all. But the whole point is the Asgardians and Thor Ragnarok all get taken out, and so the only ones that are left are the ones that are on that ship. And he kills everybody on that ship. So,
he does, yeah.
Yeah, so...
It's not like they fought him off and, allowed, some Asgardians to escape.
Yeah, he even didn't do Thanos' typical thing of leaving half alive and half dead. He just kills them all.
He just kills them.
Yep.
One of the issues that I had with the movie Civil War is, and I think it's an amazing movie, but for what happened, the reveal there that the Winter Soldier was responsible for Stark's parents being murdered, that he was actually the one who did it, there's really no consequences in that movie. I mean, it almost has like an upbeat ending. Which I thought was a big slap in the face, because it was like they put a Band-Aid on an open gash, and it doesn't solve anything. However, the fallout is really apparent in this movie, because Stark doesn't want to call Captain America.
He doesn't.
As it turns out, it doesn't really matter, because Tony Stark wasn't on Earth, for more than 5 minutes after that conversation happened.
Right. Yeah.
So I mean, so I'm almost wondering if the fallout, if it's even present in this movie, because there wouldn't have been much of a conversation that those two could have had.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just one of those things that I think about, like, the Avengers need to be on the same page, and I would say that for the first time, the name, the Avengers, actually applies here. Like, this is the first time that they are going to have to, in order to bring all these people back to life.
By the end of the movie is what you're saying.
Yeah, well, by the end of the movie and going into Avengers 4, now the name finally makes sense, because, they are going to have to live up to their name.
Yes.
The only other issue that I had, and this was a big one, which really made me hate parts of this movie, and that was, I just felt it was really dishonest and cheap to kill off so many heroes. And I mean, I went and saw this movie with, my new family, with two little kids, and I gotta tell you, I'm really upset with Marvel. It's just, here's the thing. They don't have the balls to keep Spider-Man dead and to keep T'Challa dead. Those two already have sequels planned. Yes. They would be foolish not to make 2 more Black Panther movies. There's always going to be Spider-Man movies. Yes. And Guardians Volume 3 isn't just going to be starring Rocket Raccoon. Okay? That would be really funny if they tried to do a movie with just a CGI raccoon, but we know that's not going to happen.
Oh, man.
So I'm really pissed, because clearly everyone has to come back.
Yes, everyone's got to come back. But we all know that anyway.
But it's just how it is. It's incredibly cheap. It's ridiculous to put everyone through that amount of heartache.
Nice.
Simply to undo what we all know they're going to do. I just don't. I'm really unhappy about it.
You cannot keep them all down. It's not a thing that happens in comic books. They always come back.
They always come back.
They always come back. I don't know.
This is a big, giant black eye. I was not happy about the end of this movie. So, all right. I know I'm getting older.
Yep. This is a very get off my lawn moment. Okay.
Get off my fucking lawn. And to now, all my neighbors, I say, Get the hell off my lawn and engage the sprinklers.
It turns the sprinklers on. Oh. And thank you for the F-bomb that I now have to take out.
Oh, sorry.
I don't know what you're talking about. We all know that people were gonna die. It's like it was gonna happen.
I'm so annoyed.
And we all
right
know that they're gonna come back, especially since they have sequels planned. Like we know that there's more movies coming. So I mean, they're gonna have to bring them all back. I'm curious how they're gonna bring them all back, but that's the point of that next movie now, isn't it? All right, man. Let's get into the likes, then.
Fine.
Dang it. The one thing I want to say, and this is what I mentioned towards the beginning of the podcast, and that's that I think the Russo brothers did a really good job of giving equal time to a lot of the characters. It's very difficult when you have like 18 characters or something like that, and we were talking about earlier how the ones that died got screen time. And yes. I thought that giving them the extra screen time was really valuable. And then I think giving all the other Avengers screen time also is very valuable. So to me, it just felt like, everybody got the amount of time they needed for this movie. And so I just thought that was just so well done, because it's really difficult to do that with all these characters. There's no way that's easy to do that. And I thought that they did a fantastic job with that one. So I wanted to say that. The visual effects in this movie, especially Thanos, is amazing. Thanos just looks great. He actually looks like he's on screen. He actually looks like he's actually there in the scenes. And I think that says a lot when you have something like Justice League that literally was like 6 months ago. You know, like it's right, within a year. And then you see something like Steppenwolf, which is just not very good. But you see Thanos is just on point, and it looks great. And it just, like, I had to make a comment about how well done Thanos is in this movie. And just tacking on along with that, Thanos as a character was like my favorite in this movie. He's so good, and I feel like we got a lot of why we've built up to this character and how powerful he is, how intelligent he is, and everything about him is just great. One of my favorite scenes in this movie is when he's about to like knock Stark the hell out, and he specifically says that he like respects Tony Stark because he's gifted with the curse of knowledge. And I thought that I absolutely loved that line. I was just like, yep, that's Thanos in a nutshell. It tells you a lot about Thanos, and it tells you a lot about Tony Stark. Right. Just like in one line. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. Speaking along the lines with Thanos some more is I love the relationship he has with Gamora. It's obviously this really weird, estranged like relationship, right? And having all these scenes with her, and it pays off, because there's a lot of this movie where she's trying to kill him for obvious reasons, and he still loves her though. Yet she's never thought that. And so that scene where he has to sacrifice her and he sheds tears is such a just phenomenal scene. I just absolutely enjoy how he just she's like laughing at him because he's done all this work and it doesn't matter because he loves nothing. And in fact, he loves her and has to sacrifice her. It's just like such a great scene. I love that scene. It's one of my favorite scenes in the movie. I absolutely loved it. Did you have a comment on this?
Yeah, I mean, that was, I really felt like they did an incredible job with the relationship between Thanos and Gamora. And in a way, it makes him, I think, more likable, more relatable as a bad guy. You know, in Guardians, the way that the relationship is talked about is it's a very abusive relationship. And while I think that still holds true, the way that they interact is definitely a father-daughter sort of way. I mean, it's, you know, if your dad turned out to be, you know, the next Hitler, or turned out to be Darth Vader, something like that, and, you know, you were the one trying to stop him, I mean, that's, you know, like, tonally, I think they, you know, the Russo brothers, and I think Marvel nailed that relationship. You know, they define it, and it wasn't really defined in the first Guardians movie. Here, it's like well-rounded, and I think it comes full circle.
Yep, I just love that scene, man, and it's just such a good job with Thanos. I just definitely I just love that we built up to this character, and the payoff is there. I can't imagine how difficult it was in production of this movie, that you have to make this one that's basically been built up for 10 years, and a character that's been built up for 10 years. And to meet that is impressive. It's astonishing that they're able to do it, but they do it, and it's just so cool. I just love it. The only other couple things I have are just kind of little things. They're just comments, and that's, I absolutely love the way this movie ends. All of the Marvel movies have a very awesome ending credits thing, where you get this really cool visual effects and motion graphics and all that other stuff to just make it look really cool. When they do before they do the actual roll of credits, there's always that just the actors. Mm-hmm. This one ends Game of Thrones style, and I think it's exactly how they should have done it. Because what happens is all of this happens. It ends with Thanos, and it cuts to black. And there's something that Game of Thrones always does. You know, you see the red wedding, and it cuts to black, and you have to sit there and think about what you just watched. Right, yeah. And so there's something. It has this very somber ending, which is one of the things that's hard to do in these movies. And it has to be a transitional movie to do that. And the only other time you see stuff like that is like episode 5, where it's just like, well, shit. They just got their asses handed to them. Yeah. In Empire, and you're just kind of, the movie ends, and it's like not a positive ending. You're just like, crap.
I know.
What the hell? And this one has that same feeling where you're just like, man, I just like seeing, I mean, everybody has a different reaction to all of these different scenes, because you lose a lot of characters in a really short period of time. And then you have, I remember, I watched this with Jackie, and Jackie just like really didn't like, I thought that this scene was weird, that she kind of lost it a little bit in, but she lost it when Black Panther goes, because he's like helping his friend out. He's like trying to pick, and then he just gone. And she kind of loses it there. But then you have the worst one, what I'd have to say has to be Peter Parker. It is. Seeing Spider-Man, just like, it shows you, the acting that Tom Holland does in that scene is just devastating. It's such a devastating scene. It's so heartbreaking. And you finally, like, you look at Spider-Man, and all of this stuff is happening with him, and he's got all these powers, and he's just an amazing character, but you forget that he's still a kid. Yeah. But in this scene, you're watching a teenager die, you know, and it's like heartbreaking when you see him do it.
You know, it's a punch to the throat is what
it
is.
In
a big way.
Oh yeah, it's tough, man. It's tough to watch that scene with him like pleading with Tony Stark. It's bad. It's a rough scene, and I absolutely loved how they ended this movie with the Game of Thrones. It just cuts to black, and then you don't get a fancy credit scene. You get white text just sitting there, and you have to think about everything you just saw, and everybody's gonna sit there and watch it because there's an end credit scene. Right. So the only other thing I have is just a comment, and I thoroughly enjoyed seeing the thoroughly enjoyed this like ridiculous scene when you have Stormbreaker being created and you have this giant dwarf. It's like
a giant dwarf. Yep.
A giant freaking dwarf. And I was like, this is the first time you'll ever see him that gigantic. You'll never see that again. And I just loved that. I thought it was just such a funny little thing. I'm like, geez, he's like a giant freaking dwarf. But that's all I have, man. Let's get to yours.
Okay, one of the things I actually liked in this movie, and I mentioned it earlier, we talked about Heimdall, even though he doesn't have a large scene.
Yes.
I liked in the same fashion, I thought that everything with Doctor Strange was on point.
Oh, yes.
And I really liked what they did with his character here, because a lot of people might be scratching their heads as to why he gave up the time stone, but
and probably scratching their heads wondering why he didn't use the time stone.
Why he didn't use it. However, he saw one way for them to win, even though he knew that he wouldn't live to see it happen.
Yes.
That saving Tony's life, that, Tony Stark plays some part in defeating Thanos and in restoring the galaxy.
Yes.
And so he trades the stone to stop Thanos from killing Stark. And I think it's almost understated in a way, but, the fact that the last thing he says is that they're in the end game now. I mean, that's such a strange thing to do. That's such a Doctor Strange kind of line, and he's not gonna tell him, look, you need to do this, this, and this.
Yeah, he basically just tells him
to play out. Yeah,
he basically just tells him that there was no other way.
There's no other way.
There's no other way, and even though Tony Stark's just irate and just doesn't understand what the hell just happened, he definitely he's just like, there's no other way. It has to be done, and then he disappears.
And so I thought that was really true to the character, and there's a lot of things, even though the scenes with all the characters, with a lot of different characters, are short. I thought that they nail the aspects that are there. They get everything really spot on. I loved, we talked about Thanos and Gamora. I loved his character development. And it's really changed over the years. Yeah. But when they explain his goal, there's a flaw in how he sees the solution to the universe. And I think that's okay. I think it's okay for him to think that eliminating half the population is merciful and the right thing to do when he could double the amount of food.
Yes,
instead,
the resources, doubling the resources.
I don't see that being an issue, because characters are allowed to be flawed. They're allowed to have a certain point of view. Yes. And while there may be certain people online who are just saying, well, this is a plot hole, I really don't see it as that. Thanos has really evolved, because I thought for certain, in the comic books, the reason why he assembles all the Infinity Stones and the Gauntlet is to win the favor back of the only person in the universe who cares about him, who is a character named Death, Lady Death. Yes. Death is a character in the Marvel Universe. In the first Avengers movie, this is going way back, but the Chitauri General in the post-credit scene tells Thanos that to go to Earth is to court death, and Thanos just grins. And this was before Josh Brolin was ever cast, and you don't really get a good look at Thanos. But that line, to court death, and a lot of the things that have happened since then really led me to believe that Thanos was doing all of this to win back his lady love. Yeah. And then, as it turns out, that's just not even the case at all. And so, while that might create some inconsistencies in the other movies, I just felt like this...
Or we don't even, I don't know. Or we don't even know. Maybe
we don't even know for sure.
It might show up in the next movie. We don't know.
So, anyway.
I think that would make it more convoluted if you added that into
I know, yeah. They're already going to add in another character into that movie.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm not sure she's needed. Thanos is already a big enough problem.
Yeah, he is.
I think it's good that Loki dies essentially protecting his brother. And that should be the last time we see Loki. I don't think any of the people who were on that Asgardian ship who died are going to come back. That can't happen.
Yeah.
So if this was it for Hiddleston, he had a really good run.
Yeah, he did.
With Marvel.
Yeah, and it just having their complex relationship through multiple movies, and then kind of having it come full circle where they're still, in the end, they're still brothers, and he was willing to die to save his brother, and I think that was really good.
Yeah, that's a good way to bring everything full circle, since we're talking about that for that character and to close out his arc.
Yeah.
The last thing, which we mentioned really early on, but it's such a lovable gag to come up and to be addressed as Thor's eye. Rocket excuse me, is so funny about how he is always trying to take people's eyes or their robotic limbs, and because he just finds it hilarious. and I love that that's how Thor gets his eye back. Is that he's just like, wait a minute, that eye patch is stupid, and it is really stupid. It's very troublesome.
Yes.
And so it's just really, I mean, as a geek and as a fan of comic books, I just love that in the crossover, like it's perfect that it works out the way that it does.
Yeah, it does.
So one more thing, one more little all right, is that Thanos does tell Thor and all the audience how you defeat him. And it might be something that people miss.
Yes.
But he does tell Thor, you should have gone for my head.
Yep.
And I love that. That's a wink at everyone watching the movie, and whether you pick up on it or not, there's only one way to kill Thanos, and that's by removing his head.
Pretty much.
All right. That's it for me. 59 minutes in, baby.
Nice. All right, so let's go ahead and rate this. So, I mean, I think it's fun. I think it manages to fit in all these characters, and it does it so well. And I love all the funny scenes, the interaction between Chris Pratt and Chris Hemsworth. So you got these two, like Thor and Star-Lord, just like bickering, and just there's a lot of little things like that throughout this movie. Doctor Strange and Tony Stark bickering. It's just stuff like that just makes it lots of fun. So it's just a fun movie. I love the story. I love Thanos. Love the characters. Everything about this movie is just so good, and so I have no idea how you can't see it, buy it. That's what I'm going to say. It's great.
I have a rebuttal, sir. First of all, everyone's already seen it.
Yes.
So that's fine. That's not really the issue I have. But I'm going to say Netflix it.
Nice.
I have the biggest love-hate relationship with this movie. And the thing is, I have zero interest in watching it again. Unless it's to watch it just before Avengers 4. Because I was just that, I can't sit through this again. Knowing that I have to watch T'Challa die, and Spider-Man die.
Yes,
forget it. It's crazy. I need to start shaving some heads in this place now. Stat, get in the line. I'm shaving your heads.
Oh man, it's fantastic. The movie's great.
The movie's incredible, but Netflix it.
I mean, you're definitely going to be able to Netflix it, because apparently Disney's still giving them things.
Well, okay, so
apparently,
it's so stupid. I'm not giving Disney my money for streaming. I would rather just buy the movie.
Nice.
I don't understand why Disney couldn't just buy Netflix. It's so stupid.
But they're buying up everything else.
The production pipeline is in place. Just buy Netflix, and boom, all your crap can go on there.
I feel like the way Netflix runs, they never sell it. I feel like that's the problem.
Yeah, I think that's true. Netflix is run by a bunch of people who are just stuck up enough to not sell. Hey, we ran Blockbuster Video out of here, man.
Oh yeah,
we ran them the hell out of town. That's not even a thing.
Oh man, that's crazy. I just thought of something about like, this is just a random comparison that just popped up in my head, but I remember reading a review from a critic who rated this movie, but he rated this movie without seeing anything else. So he just saw this movie, Avengers Infinity War, which he gave it such a bad rating. He's like, all these characters just show up, they don't explain who they are, all this stuff.
Yeah, no
I'm like, it has to be a gag review. Like, it has to be a gag review. But he just totally lays into this movie, and I'm like, there's 10 years of movies that you have to see just to watch this movie. And so the funny part about that is it reminds me, when I read that, it reminded me of the movie Justice League, which we did a review on Justice League. And all of the issues with Justice League, all of them, has pretty much everything to do with it doesn't have other movies to explain what's happening in the current one. So if you had a movie about how Cyborg is the way he is, if you had a movie before about how Flash is the way he is, and then even just have end credit scenes to explain why Steppenwolf is there, all of a sudden, Justice League, you could not change anything else, and Justice League would automatically be a better movie, which is just shocking. You know what I mean?
Probably true, yes. It does not help to jump the gun.
No, it doesn't help to jump the gun. I just now popped in my head. I had to make a comment. All right, so let's go ahead and sign out. If anybody wants to contact us, we can always contact us at halfpastpodcast.com.
Like us on Facebook.
And rate us on iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify, or any other podcast directory.
We're on Stitcher, Libsyn, and TuneIn. I love my Stitcher app.
Yeah, you do love Stitcher. Email us at halfpastcast@gmail.com. That's halfpastcast@gmail.com. I definitely pay attention to the emails.
Yes, Pandora.
Yes, Pandora.
Stop hitting on my sexy black friend.
Oh, jeez.
Sure, he smells like cocoa butter, and you kind of want to lick his head. Not that head.
Oh, off the rails. Okay, get back on, Jones.
Tweet us at halfpastpodcast.
Thank you, everybody, for listening, and thanks, everybody, for your support. I just love seeing emails and everything. It's great, so give us a contact. It's fun. Next week, we're going to try to get Deadpool 2 done. Ian has already seen it.
I have. So, mum's the word.
Mum's the word. All right, that's fine. So, I guess we'll just see everybody next week. So, this is the Half Past Podcast. I'm Graham Ricks.
Jonesy.
See you next flick.
Play some music.